Well, good evening, and welcome to the Warehouse Church. I'm Darlene Miller, and I'm glad to be with you tonight for this Bible study. We're still in our permission series, studying the book of Esther. And we'll be coming from the last two chapters, 9 and 10, permission granted, victory reversal. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Warehouse OTR, and you can view all of the messages, including the ones that have gone before in this permission series. So Esther became queen due to the fact that Queen Vashti, the previous queen, ignored the request from the king to come out to the banquet and parade herself and show off. He wanted to show off his beautiful wife, and she refused. And this did not go well for her, if we later know that she was banished. Now, Esther literally means star. And Esther is truly a star in this story. She believed the plan of God to redeem her people. And that divine plan concerned the nation of Israel. And from this special people, the bright morning star, the Messiah himself, would come. And she staked her life on the promises and the providence of God. She trusted even when she lived in the darkest of times in the nation's history. And I imagine that she wondered why things were the way they were and why it was that she would be chosen to step up, to come forth and seek the king's favor. Mordecai said, how do you know that this is not the time for you? But if you don't do it, God will raise up somebody else, but you could still suffer loss. So what happens when we find ourselves in the middle of a dark situation? Do we believe the things that are happening to us are accidental? Do we seek to change our circumstances, or do we even try to? Should we just accept it, or should we try to change them? Now, Esther, as I said, means star. And she shone bright. She was the star of this story. And she shows us how to be light. In chapter 8, we see that the king has given Haman's estate to Queen Esther. And Haman was the man who had devised evilness towards the Jews. And all because he had issue with Mordecai, who was Esther's uncle. Mordecai refused to stand in his presence or to even revere him or to bow in his presence. And he had an issue with that. This caused him to seek the demise of a total nation, all because of one person. But the king had given Haman's estate to Queen Esther, and she appointed Mordecai over that estate. He also gave Mordecai his signet ring that he had reclaimed from Haman. And Esther threw herself at the mercy of the king. She threw herself at his feet, pleading with him to revoke this evil plan that Haman had devised. Now, Haman, he has been hanged for his evil plot. But the plot is still in effect because it can't be revoked because it was signed by the king. So she's pleading with the king to revoke it, to overturn it. So he raises his royal scepter to her, and she stands and says, if it pleases the king, and he regards me with favor, and thinks it the right thing to do, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, devised, and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster come to my people? And how can I bear to see the destruction of my family? Now, Esther had the king's ear, and he knew that he needed to do something. So he told them, write another decree in the king's name and in behalf of the Jews, as it seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. And right away, his secretaries got busy writing all of Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, to the governors, the nobles of all 127 provinces, which stretched from India to Cush. That means they had to have them transcribed in all the languages of those people, and all the Jews. It had to be in their script as well. He signed the king's name and sealed them with the king's signet ring, then sent them out by mounted couriers who rode fast horses that were especially bred for the king. So the hand of the Lord was upon the Jewish nation. They were granted favor and given the right to defend themselves, because the enemies were laying in wait on the 13th to destroy them. So they could now defend themselves, as the Lord directed their strategic defense. Since the Jews were backed by the king's command and decree, we get to witness a miraculous reversal in the victory for the Jews over those who hated them and sought to destroy them. Now, having been enslaved in a strange land, I would think their current situation would make them feel just stuck, and the life sucked right out of them. But they gained new confidence now because they had the king's backing, but moreover, they know that the Lord's favor is with them. So they're well able to carry out the victory. So they were victorious in battle in every one of those 127 provinces. But the thing in chapter 9, it says that before they even got to those places, God had already struck fear in the hearts of their enemies throughout all those 127 provinces. This assured victory for the Jews. After all, Mordecai had become pretty powerful. He was second in command to the king. So this moved all the officials of the provinces, the governors, the rulers, and even the king's administrators to assist the Jews in their defensive battle for fear of their own lives. Now, this small nation destroyed their enemies in all those provinces, and they were spread out in those provinces, different places, different posts, but they had a unity and a focus and a mindset to win. And most importantly, their faith was in the one true and living God, Almighty. So it was that the Jews were well prepared and carried out the defense as it was decreed on all of those who hated them. They killed off Haman's 10 sons, and at the request of Queen Esther, the 10 sons were hung on gallows, just as their father was. This couldn't go unnoticed, and it was evident that the God of the Jews is faithful, and he annihilates the enemies of his people. But rest assured, it is to further his plan and his purpose. So he used Queen Esther and Mordecai because their hearts were humbled and their wills were yielded to him. And they sought to make things better, not just for themselves, but for the people as well. And God was glorified in this. Now, we must take note that before they did anything, they fasted and prayed. When you fast and pray, this gets your attention, your whole attention to God. There's nothing else in the way. You've set aside the plate. You've set aside media. You set aside all those things that clamor for our attention. And God is the supreme attention. So this is a shining example that God provides provision, position, and opportunity for advancement. And when he does, it's not just for us. Really, we are tools in his hand and vessels to be used for his glory and the advancement of his kingdom. We must prepare ourselves to hear and get God's divine strategy and the marching orders. Then we can go forth, because we know that the battle is not ours, but it is the Lord's. And we are to align ourselves with his word, have the right posture, and to get in position. Sometimes we can change things. And we must try. Sometimes we wonder if we can, and we just settle in. That's why we're here, though, is to change things. We're to make an impact in the earth. We're called his people, and we're to be resolute in our faith, resolute in our belief and what we stand for. It must be known. As the saying goes, there's no silent Christian. And at other times, having tried, we may find that we cannot alter anything, nor can we escape it. And so we have to allow those situations to change us. And we must accept the privilege of shining in the darkness, as Esther did. She was a shining star, and she took that mission. We've all been given a mission to go forth into all the world and preach the gospel and teach about Jesus. Esther and Mordecai thwarted the attempts and the assaults of Haman on the Jews. And as a result, the month of Adar, which was supposed to have been a month of sorrow for the Jews, turned into a month of joy. Purim was the name of the holiday, and is taken from the root word pur, P-U-R, which means lots, because lots were cast for the Jews' ruin and destruction. Thus, Purim became an established Jewish holiday and is celebrated for 2 days in the month of Adar, the 14th and 15th of the month. There's celebration and feasting and giving gifts to the poor. So even in this, they didn't forget those who were less fortunate, because they knew what they had been through. They knew what they had seen, and they were giving to the poor as well. They feasted and celebrated, and it was to be a custom handed down from generation to generation, to be carried out as prescribed and at the time appointed. And as in verse 28 of chapter 9, it said, these days of Purim should be remembered and observed, and should never fall or fail to be celebrated by the Jews. Nor should the memory of these days die out among their descendants. In chapter 10, it is stated that this very holiday was decreed and written down in the records of the kings of Media and Persia. So we see God blesses acts of service, and he will bring them to light in his own perfect timing. For Mordecai had been a faithful servant, and it even saved the king's life a while back. Thus God gave him favor, or clout, if you would, with the king and his niece, Queen Esther. Mordecai had been made second in command next to the king, and held in high esteem even with his fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of the people, and he spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. And now if we can look back from the beginning, where things were not going so well for the Jews, and they were about to be annihilated, no one could predict the outcome here. They were victorious in God. And we see that God always has a plan, and he always blesses obedience. So as we walk in the ways that God has called and prescribed, we should live as those who have been spoken for, because we have been. And we should point others to Jesus, be patient with difficult people, because we will run into difficult people in the course of our lives. There are going to always be those who oppose truth, and we should gently instruct them and always entreat them with love. I'd like to take this time to thank you for joining us tonight. And I'd also like to invite you to our service on Sunday, 10 o'clock at 1310 Race Street and Over the Rhine. Our services are also streamed. If you're unable to visit in person, we stream them at 10, and they can be seen at 10 and 12 p.m. every Sunday. Now I'd like to take the opportunity to invite you to our Back to School event, which is happening August 13th from 12 to 3. We have a meal that we have prepared for all of the families that come. Everyone that comes is welcome. We give away backpacks and school supplies for the children. We have different activities for them. We have circuses and we have the petting zoo. We've had giveaways for them and the families, TVs and bikes and other things like that. We also have had puppet shows. So if you come, you'll see what we have ready for you. We invite everyone. So as you hear this, share it with others. Share it with the other family members and invite them to come. August 13th from 12 to 3. May the God of peace be with you. We are the Warehouse Church, where transformation begins. Good night.